There was only one rule. Ryuichi Kihara could never beat Riku Miura before a competition. That was it. It wasn't written anywhere. There was no contract, no coach demanding it, no official instruction from anyone. Somehow, over time, it simply became an unspoken rule between the two of them. A rule nobody taught them, yet both completely understood. And strangely enough, that tiny rule born from something as meaningless as a video game quietly supported 7 entire years of their partnership. February 2026, the night of the pair skating free program at the 2026 Winter Olympics. The scoreboard flashed 158.13 points, a world record score. Total score, 231.2. Japan had just won its first Olympic gold medal in pair skating history. In that unforgettable moment, most people had no idea how many small, invisible routines had carried them to that stage. The little traditions, the quiet habits, the tiny rules nobody saw. And today, on Rare News, we're talking about that invisible system. The late-night games before competitions, the Christmas memories, the way their bodies moved before words were even spoken, the hidden structure that never appeared on a scoresheet, yet somehow helped create Olympic gold. But first, you need to understand what kind of person Ryuichi Kihara really is. Back in the summer of 2019, Kihara was 26 years old. He had spent years competing as a singles skater, but his results had stalled. Retirement had already started creeping into his mind. Around that time, he became loosely involved in the Japanese Skating Federation's pair skating development project while working part-time at a skating rink in Nagoya. It was the kind of period where the future felt blurry. Like no matter how hard you looked ahead, there was no clear light waiting for you. Meanwhile, Riku Miura was only 17. She had started feeling the limits of singles skating and was beginning to consider switching to pairs. The talent was obvious, but talent alone wasn't enough to guarantee a future. That summer, the two finally met. Canadian coach Bruno Marcotte traveled to Japan to help strengthen the country's pair skating program, and a tryout was held. Later, Kihara described the moment in unforgettable words. He said it felt like lightning struck him. The instant he skated with Riku, he felt like he could suddenly see a world he had never seen before. 7 years later, they stood at the very top of the sport. But this story isn't really about the dramatic ending. It's about how those two people slowly built a life together during those 7 years. After forming their partnership in 2019, they moved to Oakville, Canada, a quiet town about 30 minutes outside Toronto with a population of around 220,000 people. They knew almost nobody there. Very few places spoke Japanese. Japanese television was non-existent. A 26-year-old man and an 18-year-old girl suddenly found themselves living almost entirely alone in a foreign country. When people move somewhere unfamiliar, they usually react in one of two ways. They either close themselves off or they open up. Kihara and Miura chose the second path, or maybe, more accurately, they had no other choice. There were no friends waiting for them outside. Going back to Japan wasn't easy. Naturally, they started spending more and more time together. After practice, they ate meals together. On weekends, they drove to shopping malls together. At night, they returned to apartments in the same building. Day after day, that became their normal life. And somewhere inside that ordinary routine, video games quietly connected them even more deeply. At first, it may have started casually. Maybe it was just a way to forget the exhaustion of training. Maybe it was something to fill long, sleepless nights. They probably don't even remember how it started anymore. But before long, games like Mario Kart and Momotaro Dentetsu, known by fans as Momotsu, became part of their daily life, especially Momotsu. By around the 2021 World Championships, playing games before competitions had become an actual routine for them. Later, Kihara explained why. "When we're able to play games, it means we have mental space," he said. "If we can enjoy Momotsu, then emotionally we're relaxed. And if we skate in that relaxed state, we can perform with freedom." Once we realized that, it became part of our routine. Miura agreed completely. "Games are our way to refresh ourselves," she explained. "We need time where we're not thinking about skating." For them, games weren't really games anymore. They became a way to measure their emotional condition. If they could laugh together while playing, then tomorrow's performance would probably be okay. And inside that routine, one absolute rule was born. Ryuichi Kihara was not allowed to beat Riku Miura before a competition. Kihara finally revealed the rule publicly on April 2, 2026. The two visited the headquarters of Konami Group, the parent company behind Momotsu's publisher, for a recording event. During the press conference, Kihara smiled and admitted it himself. "Before competitions, there's a rule that I'm not allowed to beat Riku-chan," he said. "I adjust the results." The moment he said it, Miura looked at him, and both of them burst into laughter together. Multiple Japanese media outlets reported the moment immediately. Sports papers, news agencies, entertainment reporters, everyone picked up the story. Soon, the phrase "Riku-chan must never lose before a competition" spread across social media. But stopping there almost feels too simple. Because was this really just about games? Ryuichi Kihara has always described himself as the one who takes the lead. He's older, more experienced. In Canada, he often handled daily life, cooking meals, driving the car, organizing schedules, quietly carrying responsibilities without making a big deal out of it. And yet when it came to games, he intentionally chose to lose. Was that simply kindness? Or was it something much deeper? The hours before a competition are different from normal life. Fear, pressure, expectation, anxiety, everything mixes together. Thoughts race in every direction while the body slowly tightens before the athlete even realizes it. In that fragile mental state, Kihara understood something important. There's a difference between stepping onto the ice after losing and stepping onto the ice after winning. When Riku won a game and smiled afterward, something changed in her expression. Her shoulders relaxed. The tension disappeared just slightly. Her body accepted the feeling that things were going well. And then she carried that feeling onto the ice. Whether Kihara consciously calculated all of this or not, nobody knows. But the effect was real. One of Riku Miura's greatest strengths has always been her emotional expression during performances. Of course, her technical ability is world-class, but what truly reaches people is the joy she radiates while skating. That kind of emotion cannot be faked. Those expressions only appear when the heart is truly free. And maybe that's why this small rule mattered more than anyone realized. Because perhaps the smile that appeared during a simple video game the night before competition eventually became the smile that captured Olympic gold in front of the entire world. The first time I heard this story, I honestly couldn't find words right away, because I realized something. There are acts of kindness so quiet that most people never notice them. Anyone can say good luck. Anyone can say believe in yourself. Those words are easy, but what Kihara chose to do was different. He protected her confidence without ever announcing it. What Kihara did was something far quieter than simple encouragement. He built a system inside a video game designed entirely to protect the smile of the person beside him. Then he quietly followed that rule for 7 straight years. No announcements, no dramatic speeches, so naturally that almost nobody noticed it at all. But this kind of consideration can only come from spending an enormous amount of time with someone. You can't do it unless you truly understand how the other person's emotions move. You have to know exactly what kind of expression appears on Riku Miura's face when she wins. You have to understand how much that single smile affects her performance on the ice. Only someone who has memorized another person emotionally could do something like that. And there's one moment in particular that proves how important this rule really became. We have to talk about the 2022 Winter Olympics. In February 2022, Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara won a silver medal in the Olympic team event. But when they entered the individual competition afterward, they finished only 7th. Later, Kihara openly reflected on why things went wrong. "Our goal was to win a medal in the team event," he admitted. "After we achieved that, mentally things became difficult. And when I thought back on it more carefully, I realized something. We hadn't played games before the competition. We suddenly noticed it. Wait, we never played before skating." Just one missing routine changed their mental balance completely. They learned from that experience. By the time the 2026 Olympics in Milan arrived, games had become something they intentionally brought into the Olympic Village itself. During breaks between practices, they played together again. They laughed together again. And this time, the results were completely different. Silver in the team event, gold in the individual event. Between Beijing and Milan, many things changed. But one of the biggest differences was simple. Before competing, they played together. Still, Milan wasn't a smooth journey from beginning to end. In the short program, disaster almost struck. During a lift, Riku Miura slipped unexpectedly. Her body nearly fell out of position, and Kihara somehow caught her with his shoulder before disaster happened. They managed to save the element, but the score was only 73.11 points, almost 10 points lower than their personal best. Suddenly, they were trailing the leaders by nearly 7 points. Afterward, Kihara crouched down with his head lowered, repeatedly shaking it in frustration. That night he couldn't sleep. The next morning he was still crying. But before the free skate, the two of them still had a little time left together inside the Olympic Village. And during that small window between pressure and history, they returned to their routine. They played games. They protected the rule one more time. Nobody knows whether Kihara intentionally lost that day like always. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But at the very least, the two of them sat side by side in front of the screen and found a moment to smile together again. And then came the free skate. Perfect. 158.13 points. World record. Olympic gold medal. Of course, nobody can honestly say a video game won them an Olympic title. But maybe without those games, the smiles that night never would have appeared. And maybe without those smiles, the performance itself would never have happened either. I don't think I'm the only person who feels that way. But the absolute rules between them didn't end with games. There was another one. Christmas had to be spent together too. This became widely known after a feature published by the Japanese magazine Shuken Bunshun shortly after the Milan Olympics in February 2026. The article focused on the private routines that quietly defined their relationship, games, Christmas, daily habits, all the invisible traditions fans never saw. And Christmas in Oakville was completely different from Christmas in Japan. In Japan, Christmas is often associated with going out, meeting friends, couples spending romantic evenings together. But in Canada, Christmas feels quieter, more intimate, more family-centered. The excitement peaks before the holiday itself, and by December 25th, stores close, neighborhoods become silent, snow covers the streets, and warm lights glow softly behind windows. That was the kind of Christmas Riku and Ryuichi experienced for 7 years straight. 7 years. Not once did they return to Japan for Christmas. Of course, they could have gone home to see family. But training schedules, competition calendars, physical conditioning, and travel realities made those opportunities difficult. And over time, Christmas simply became something they spent together in Oakville. Maybe calling it a rule isn't exactly right. It wasn't something formally decided. It simply happened naturally. But the fact that it continued without exception for 7 years means something deeper existed underneath it. And honestly, I keep thinking about one thing. Which feels lonelier? Spending Christmas alone or spending it beside someone who understands exactly how lonely you are? When you're far away from your home country, separated from family during the holidays, the presence of another person beside you suddenly means far more than usual. For Miura and Kihara, maybe spending Christmas together became proof that they weren't alone in that foreign country. Maybe that alone was enough. They didn't need extravagant celebrations. They didn't need parties. Simply existing in the same space at the same time made the winter feel warmer. The two even developed their own way of speaking to each other. Despite their age difference, they called each other Ryuichi-kun and Riku-chan. No formal speech. No strict senior-junior distance. In the world of Japanese sports, hierarchy usually matters deeply, but Kihara never forced that wall between them, and that small decision mattered more than people realize. Little by little, those choices built the invisible structure of their partnership. Lose on purpose during games, spend Christmas together, use casual names instead of formal titles. None of these things were ordered by coaches. Nobody taught them to behave this way. These rules were born naturally from daily life, but once they existed, they were never broken again. Why? Because these weren't really rules. They were mechanisms designed to help two people stay connected. When one person feels safe, they perform at their best. And when both people quietly protect each other's emotional stability, trust becomes stronger than pressure. That trust appeared again before the Milan free skate. Before competing, Riku secretly wrote a message on a Ziploc bag inside Kihara's suitcase. "We can absolutely do this, because we've already done the work." The moment Kihara opened it, he cried again. That story isn't technically part of the absolute rules, but it comes from the exact same emotional place. When the other person feels afraid, they don't rely on dramatic speeches. They place tiny pieces of encouragement into ordinary moments. That became their language. Not a language anyone taught them. A language built slowly over 7 years together. Later, Kihara would say this: "If it wasn't with Riku-chan, I never could have achieved any of this. She was the best partner imaginable." And once you understand all of these invisible rules, those words suddenly become much heavier than they first sound. Games have a strange kind of power. For a few moments, age differences disappear. Seniority disappears. Titles disappear. A controller in your hand can erase distance between people. And during those years in Oakville, games became far more than entertainment for Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara. They became a space where everything turned equal again. During practice, there was always pressure. Coaches giving technical instructions, mistakes being analyzed, success and failure hanging over every session. But at night, when the two of them sat side by side holding controllers in front of a screen, none of that existed anymore. No coaches, no judges, no scores, just two people laughing together inside a small apartment in Canada. And honestly, I think that time saved them. If you carry the full weight of elite competition every single day without relief, eventually something inside you breaks. Human beings are not built to survive endless pressure. They need moments where the world becomes light again. For Riku, that escape became games. Mario Kart was one of the first games that connected them, but eventually Momotaro Dentetsu became their true tradition. And there were reasons for that. Unlike Mario Kart, Momotsu could last for hours. It was a slower game, built around travel, strategy, luck, and long stretches of shared time together. Nobody dominated too easily. The game constantly shifted back and forth, which made Kihara must lose before competition rule easier to maintain naturally. Because in Momotsu, everyone can always see who's winning. The rankings stay visible on the screen. The score changes constantly, which means Kihara could quietly control the flow without making it obvious. Riku would laugh, play happily, and eventually celebrate another win while Kihara secretly adjusted things behind the scenes. Maybe she noticed, maybe she didn't. But honestly, I think that question almost misses the point. Because when they publicly laughed about it years later, it became clear that both of them understood what those moments really meant. Those games weren't about competition anymore. They were about emotional balance. Still, there's something fascinating about the way they talked about it publicly. At the press conference, Kihara smiled and admitted, "I adjust the results." Miura laughed beside him. But think about it for a second. If she truly never realized what he was doing, what kind of laughter was that? And on the other hand, if she knew all along, maybe she quietly pretended not to notice because accepting his kindness was also part of their unspoken rule. That possibility might actually be even more beautiful. Kihara loses for Miura. Miura silently accepts it without exposing him. Neither says it directly. And years later, they laugh about it together. That too feels like an absolute rule. And honestly, I believe the rule existed either way. But the deeper we look into these rules, the more we realize they weren't really about games at all. They were about staying emotionally connected in a world where partnerships in figure skating often collapse. Because partnerships in skating change constantly. If results stop improving, pairs separate. If injuries happen, teams split. If pressure becomes too heavy, people walk away. Over 7 years, Miura and Kihara went through injuries, slumps, heartbreaking mistakes, and emotional exhaustion. There were moments when nobody could guarantee they would still be together the following season, which is exactly why Christmas mattered so much. Every single year, they spent Christmas together in Oakville. And it wasn't simply because training schedules made traveling difficult. Yes, the figure skating season is extremely busy in December and January. But there were probably years when a short trip home could have been arranged. And still, they stayed. Maybe because Oakville had quietly become home. Later, Kihara described Oakville as feeling like a second home. And after 7 years, it probably stopped feeling foreign entirely. It became the place where their life existed. Spending Christmas there together may have felt more natural than returning separately to Japan. But I think there was another reason too. Spending Christmas together became proof that, for another year, neither of them had disappeared. Another season survived. Another year side by side. Another Christmas spent together. That matters when your entire career depends on another person staying beside you. And that's why one quote from Riku Miura became so powerful after retirement. During a press conference following the Milan Olympics, she said something incredibly direct. "I would never continue skating with anyone else." That wasn't a sudden emotional statement created in one moment. Those words came from 7 years of routines, 7 years of games before competitions, 7 years of Christmases together, 7 years of saying Ryuichi-kun and Riku-chan every single day. Maybe these absolute rules were really habits designed to prevent separation. And now we arrive at the most emotional part of the story: retirement. On April 17, 2026, the two officially announced their retirement from competitive skating. Just 2 months earlier, they had stood on top of the Olympic podium with gold medals around their necks. Then suddenly, it was over. A few days later, at the official retirement press conference in Tokyo, Kihara cried almost immediately. He struggled to get words out at all. Sitting beside him, Miura kept smiling softly while looking over at him again and again. At one point, she even joked gently, telling him not to cry. A lot of people watched those tears and assumed they came from winning Olympic gold, or maybe from the sadness of ending a competitive career. But honestly, I think there was something even deeper hidden inside them. I think he was grieving the end of ordinary life. Because retirement doesn't just end competitions. It ends the tiny routines attached to them. No more games before skating. No more secret rule about intentionally losing. No more late nights holding controllers after practice in Oakville. No more obvious reason to spend Christmas together every year. And sometimes people cry harder over losing ordinary days than losing huge moments. That's what makes this story feel so human. But retirement also changed their relationship in fascinating ways. After leaving competition, they returned to Canada and began preparing for new projects, ice shows, future coaching opportunities, even discussions about creating a Rikuryu skating academy together. Their reason for staying together didn't disappear, it simply changed shape. And strangely enough, their game routine changed too. At the 2026 Konami event, Kihara laughed and admitted something new. This time it was a serious match, he said. "I completely destroyed her." And Miura immediately fired back smiling. "I'll win next time." That tiny exchange says everything, because now there are no competitions waiting tomorrow. No pressure forcing Kihara to protect her confidence before stepping onto Olympic ice. For the first time in years, he can actually play seriously. And for the first time, Miura can openly challenge him back. The relationship became more equal, not because the care disappeared, but because the environment changed. Still, I honestly don't believe the spirit behind those rules vanished. Because kindness doesn't disappear just because the original situation ends. If caring for someone becomes a habit for 7 years, it simply finds new forms. Maybe now Kihara supports Miura differently during ice shows. Maybe he quietly adjusts things behind the scenes while she takes the spotlight. Maybe he helps younger skaters the same way he once protected her confidence before competitions. The must not win rule may be gone, but the instinct behind it probably is. And there's one final thing that makes this story special. When people first heard about these absolute rules, many immediately tried to label the relationship. Fans said they sounded like a couple. Others said they acted more like family than skating partners. But every time reporters asked directly, Miura and Kihara refused to define it. Leave it to your imagination. they would say while laughing together. Kihara once called them comrades in battle. And honestly, I think refusing to label the relationship was the most accurate answer possible. Because what they built doesn't fit neatly into ordinary categories. Not friendship, not romance, not family, not simply teammates. 7 years in a foreign country, training together every day, eating meals together, performing life-threatening lifts together, spending sleepless nights before Olympic finals together, celebrating Christmas together. There really isn't a perfect existing word for that, which is why Ryuichi became its own identity. That name alone explains something no normal label can. And underneath everything, the medals, the records, the Olympic gold, there were invisible promises nobody else ever saw. Lose on purpose in games. Spend Christmas together. Never change the way they addressed each other. Write hidden messages on Ziploc bags before competitions. Tell each other it's not over yet before stepping onto the ice. Smile and call a crying partner such a baby. None of those rules came from coaches. None came from sports psychology books. They were created naturally through 7 years of living side by side, and maybe that's why they mattered so much. Later, after retirement, Miura said something beautiful. What we built together over 7 years won't disappear instantly. And honestly, that sentence contains the entire meaning of these absolute rules, because scores remain in history forever. 158.13 points, 231.2 total score. Olympic gold medal. Those numbers will always exist on paper, but the rule that said Kihara must never beat Miura before competition will never appear in any official record. No statistic tracks it, no history book mentions it, and yet it may have helped create Olympic champions. So maybe the final question isn't really about them at all. Maybe it's about us. Do you have an absolute rule with someone in your life? A promise nobody else knows about? A quiet habit that became part of your connection with another person? Because when enough of those invisible promises pile up over time, something extraordinary begins to form between two people. Something difficult to name, but undeniably real. And maybe that was the true thing Ryuichi created over those 7 years. Not just Olympic gold, but a language only the two of them could fully understand. A language where losing a video game meant I'm supporting you. A language where spending Christmas together meant I'm still here. And even now, long after competition ended, I think they're probably still speaking that language today.